every day my misandry deepens. You know what I mean? And I feel like I have more and more and more and more and more reasons to hate these motherfuckers. It's crazy. And I'm not parasocial in the sense that I identify as a communist. The incels really hate that. And therefore, I don't capitulate to celebrities regardless of how much I feel like they may make good music or seem outside of their political ideologies and economic ideologies to be a decent person. So, I don't capitulate to the level of fandom that a lot of Megan Thee Stallion fans do. However, she is in my top 5 artists on my Apple Wrapped every year. Because I think she makes great music. I love a smart, independent woman. But at the end of the day, I can't pretend that she's not a conservative capitalist multimillionaire who does brand deals with Zionist companies and hasn't spoken out on global genocide. You know what I mean? Not something I can pretend personally. I'm not a liberal. So that being said, I don't mean for this to sound parasocial when I say the situation with Klay Thompson, amongst so many other real life things outside of celebrities, is the perfect example of why women's misandry just gets deeper and deeper, and 4B grows larger and larger, and more women are abstaining and going celibate just because they find men so abhorrent they do not want to be around them, right? And what's crazy about all that is that the response to women's misandry is what one could predict from conservative patriarchal incel men, right? Violent misogyny. And I was thinking about something after I see all of these videos going viral about these women joking about killing Klay Thompson, and they have hundreds of thousands of likes, millions of views, shout out to y'all. I think just kind of proves my point that socially we are progressing in a way that is forcing a lot of people into social progression right now, right? My last video was on like millennials and Gen Zs who are going no contact with their abusive parents, right? That's forcing older generations to progress around child abuse and mental health and trauma, etc., right? We have everything going on with the Christian nationalist MAGA crowd and the rampant fascism that's taking place. And now I don't personally believe that fascism started with Donald Trump. I believe that the United States is a fascist nation. But at the end of the day, violent fascism is being shoved in our face right now at an all-time high. And you have the people cutting off friends and family who voted for Trump, refusing to date men who voted for Trump, etc., right? And then you have, which both of these are essentially forcing social progression, right? Leaving it to the survival of the fittest, of like, hey, my parents can progress and they can go to therapy and they can understand child abuse and they can take accountability, or they cannot have a relationship with me and I won't invite them to my funeral, right? Or, you know, my family can vote for Trump and be conservative, or these men can vote for Trump and be conservative. I mean, I've even seen women saying that they're getting divorces, right? And that's their right to free will, right? But I'm not going to be around them. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm going to divorce them. I'm going to refuse to date them, whatever the case may be, right? And so there's this level of social progression that's taking place, and it makes me think about misandry and how misandry really is women finally holding men accountable on a large scale for their behavior, right? And how do men who live under a system that largely caters to them respond to that? A patriarchal, misogynistic, violent system. How do they respond to that? With violent misogyny. Red pill and black pill content, websites with step-by-steps on how to rape women, a rampant increase in incels and incel behavior. And so it's interesting to me because there's now a male loneliness epidemic, but there is not a female loneliness epidemic. That is crazy. How does that make any sense? Oh, okay. I'll walk us through it. It's almost like these men are being held accountable for being emotionally unavailable, emotionally abusive, and emotionally stunted, which is a product of patriarchy, right? It breeds emotionally unavailable men because it says men aren't supposed to be emotional. They don't feel emotions. And something I love in comparison to this is if you've ever seen Heartbreak High on Netflix. It's like a teen drama, like dramedy kind of thing. And in the second season, they talk about incels and red pill and black pill content because this group of boys is being held accountable for their overly sexual, emotionally unavailable behavior, right? And so they're large scale being rejected by the women at their school. How do they respond? They get violently upset and they blame women and victimize themselves, right? So when you live under systemic oppression as a woman, right? But it is a white supremacist patriarchal system, therefore cis-able-bodied, white men specifically, who are financially secure, largely do not experience systemic oppression. And now that could breed a bit of ego and narcissism, right? In a system where everyone else is oppressed, but you're actually being catered to in a lot of ways, right? That can breed a lot of egotistic, narcissistic kind of personas in these men, which it does. And then when they're held accountable for being egotistical, narcissistic, violent, emotionally unavailable, and misogynistic, and therefore not considered good partners because we have socially progressed past this idea of sexism that men do certain things and women do certain things, or men are biologically a certain way and women are biologically a certain way. We've already negated these things. I would encourage y'all to read science textbooks. I don't know what's going on. But outside of that, outside of your illiteracy, we've socially progressed past that, right? And a lot of men haven't because, again, the system is catering to them, so they are not attempting to dismantle it. And so I've seen firsthand from partners that I've had in the past, my friends' partners who I've hung around, gotten to know them, etc., that men are in very emotionally unavailable, emotionally unsupportive friend groups because they are all emotionally unavailable and unsupportive. And what I've actually seen more commonly, and I feel like a lot of us women have witnessed, is that they're actually mean to each other a lot of the time. They bully each other. They call each other names. They publicly humiliate each other. They shame each other. They're violent and aggressive towards each other. And they're not emotionally supportive in any way whatsoever. I would not want to be in any of these friend groups. And I remember specifically when I started to notice this pattern in my early 20s with men that I would date or men that my friends were dating, whatever the case may be, I would kind of ask them, like, why do you consider those to be your friends? Like, they seem like your number one op. Like, those motherfuckers are bullying you and you guys are all being really mean to each other and making each other feel bad about yourselves. Those are your friends? That's who you hang out with? And I come to find over time that this is actually just how men socialize because they're emotionally stunted and unavailable and they're largely violent to deal with their emotions because, friendly reminder, anger is an emotion, but it's a secondary one. So you suppress the primary emotion and you replace it with anger because that's the only thing you feel comfortable emotionally expressing as a man, and then you are angry and violent towards each other in your friend groups, and that's your only emotional support in your life, right? And so there's not a female loneliness epidemic, even though all of these women are also alone. So weird and crazy, isn't it? Because women know how to emotionally support themselves and others, and therefore form friend groups with women who do that as well. And they get emotional support and intimacy in their friend groups, but also from themselves. And if they are struggling with that, they're not ashamed to go to therapy and work on it. All the things that men lack. That is so crazy. All the things that the patriarchy breeds out of you. That is so crazy, because a straight man will do a lot of things, but they won't go to therapy. It's crazy. And in 2024 alone, out of all of these sexual abuse cases that were reported in the United States, 94% of them are men. And something I think is interesting is that a lot of these incel conservative men will bring up the fact that they don't report when they're sexually abused by women. Why? Why? Is the patriarchy going to shame you for being sexually abused? And so what kind of men is that system breeding? That's crazy. All in all, though, right, women are constantly reminded on a large, violent scale that they experience systemic violent oppression from men, right? That is rooted in misogyny. So not only are we seeing these things, right, like the sexual abuse statistics for the US, the sexual abuse statistics for the humanitarian crisis in Sudan, the sexual abuse statistics for Latin America, and the rampant femicide that's going on. Right, and we see the Epstein files, and we have these experiences with men in our lives, and most of us don't know a woman who hasn't been sexually assaulted and or raped. I personally do not. I know quite a few women that have been raped, though. When we have these experiences with ourselves, with our friends, with our family, we see it in the media, we read the statistics, we educate ourselves on the studies, and we see, right, that there is a system of violent misogyny taking place that we live under. And that same system is emotionally suppressing and stunting men, right, who then become violent because there's plenty of psychology to show that when you suppress your emotions, secondary emotions like anger come to the surface, one of the only emotions that men feel not ashamed of expressing, and then it gets out of hand, right? And so we are experiencing systemic violence from men, where they are raping and killing us, even when we're children, right? And we have so much evidence to prove that we are experiencing that on a much larger scale than men are, right? And we also have statistics to prove that a lot of the men that are experiencing it as well are experiencing it from other men. And then we hold these men accountable socially, and we say, hey, if you're going to be really conservative and misogynistic, if you're going to be emotionally unavailable, if you're going to refuse to do domestic labor, etc., I'm not interested in being with you. I can pay my own bills, I can take care of myself, I can fulfill myself, I have friends who are emotionally fulfilling, I don't need you. Hence, there's a male loneliness epidemic, but all of these women who are also alone, there's not a female loneliness epidemic. That is crazy. And women are choosing to abstain from relationships with men, right? And rather than these men taking accountability and saying, yeah, I guess if no women want to be around me, I have to acknowledge that that's my fault. That's my problem. I'm doing something at the end of the day that is creating that. What do they do though instead? Because what does the patriarchy breed? Egotistical, narcissistic, emotionally stunted men who are used to the system catering to them. Oh, so how do they respond? They get pissy. They get pissy like little cucks that they are. That's fucking crazy. And they refuse to admit that they are the problem. And what do? They become violently misogynistic and start creating red pill and black pill content on how they can manipulate women into being with them. They start banning abortions, which in and of itself is violent, because you're now forcing women to carry children to full term and give birth to a child that she doesn't want against her will. That is violent. They're joking about how they should discuss appealing the 19th Amendment because women shouldn't have the right to vote, and now it's becoming a serious conversation, right? And so they respond exactly how you'd think they would, because they're being bred under a system that largely caters to them, which leads to emotionally stunted, egotistical, narcissistic men who are violent misogynists. And then how do they respond to women in mass? Rejecting them. Simply because, now we're not being violent towards them like they are towards us. We're not being violent towards them. We're just rejecting them. We're just saying, nope, not interested. Stay away from me. I'd rather be alone. And how do they respond? With websites on step-by-step how you can rape women. With red pill misogynistic content on how you can manipulate women into being with you. It's almost like you're proving our point every time we turn around. That is so crazy. That's crazy how that works. And so I see this shit with Klay Thompson, Megan Thee Stallion. I see that he was emotionally volatile, potentially abusive towards her during his basketball season. He cheated on her after over a year of being together and buying a house together under the pretense that what? He's emotionally unavailable. He doesn't know if he can do monogamy. I wonder if he's going to go to therapy. Or if, in response to all of these women making viral TikToks joking about how they hope he plays horrible, they're wishing death on him. I wonder how he's going to respond to that. Do you think he's going to go to therapy? Or do you think it's going to bring up a bit of aggressive misogyny? That's crazy. And so it's just interesting to see the social progression of everything and the constant examples of like, it's just survival of the fittest at this point. It's like get in or get out, like we're running out of time. When it comes to conservative capitalism and people who are MAGA or Christian nationalists. When it comes to, misandry and the 4B movement, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to parents or children cutting off their parents and refusing to have relationships with them, which heavily revolves around mental health treatment and therapy. It's interesting to see the social progression and the survival of the fittest of it all, of saying, you know what, like, this is where you need to progress to. If you're not going to do it, get the fuck away from me. And then seeing what they do with that, right? And what's interesting to me is in response to women's, feelings of misandry and participation and abstaining from men and whatever way they're doing that, how do these egotistical, narcissistic, violently misogynistic men respond? With ego and violent misogyny, as well as narcissism, because they deny that any of it is their fault and they blame it all on women. That is so crazy. And so if anyone wants to check out Heartbreak High, really interesting teen dramedy that came out, I think, in the last couple of years. And it's so interesting to me the way that they portray this in the show and call out the fact that this is a social trend that's taking place, where these men in this show are in high school, and so they're being very sexual towards women. They're very emotionally available, and they're just very they sexualize women, right? Very, very heavily, to the point that they don't treat them like they're people. But they're also so emotionally stunted that they don't really have the capacity to do that or know how to do it, right? So the women in this show, they call them pervs, they say like, you're sexually harassing me, you're sexualizing me, like, get away from me, you're a loser, you're an incel, whatever. And then the boys get really mad and they take it out on the women and they start engaging in red pill and black pill content. But when it's all said and done, you know what happens? They're forced to admit that it's actually them that's the problem. And their only options to improve on themselves or be left behind. So that's fucking crazy.